Hey, what is going on guys? Represent Stealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Rework Dark Harvest and take a look at which champions are doing the best with it right now, which champions you should not be running it on, and we're also gonna compare it to Electrocute to see in which situations you would want to run one or the other. So both Dark Harvest and Electrocute are pretty good choices on a lot of different champions in this patch. However, in different situations and depending on the champion you're playing, you're going to want to run one or the other. So for Electrocute, it is going to be the more consistent rune. You're always going to have about the same amount of damage every single game with Electrocute. It's going to scale really nice into the mid to late game, and it does have a higher AD and AP ratio on it. So once you do get your AD and AP items, you're always going to have that increase in damage with Electrocute. Whereas with Dark Harvest, you are going to be able to reset on kills with it, so that is a very big pro for a lot of different champions. It also is going to provide you with a bit more damage in the early levels, so if you are a champion that's looking to fight early on in the first few levels, it is going to be a good rune choice there. And it also does have more burst potential if you can get a lot of stacks. If you can snowball really hard in the early game, then Dark Harvest is going to be the better rune choice. So generally speaking, you should look to take Dark Harvest over Electrocute if you're in an easy lane where you're confident you can bully out your opponent and get Dark Harvest stacks in the early game. If you're in a harder matchup and you don't think you're going to be able to stack in the early game, then Electrocute is going to be better in that situation most of the time. Also, if you're playing a champion that can abuse the reset on Dark Harvest, then it is going to be most of the time just straight up better than Electrocute, because if you're able to get those resets in team fights with the Dark Harvest, the damage output potential is going to be much higher than Electrocute. And also, if you're just playing a strong early game champion that's looking to snowball and that can snowball very hard in the early game, then Dark Harvest is going to be stronger. So if we start off in the top lane here, and we're going to go over every single role and the best champions with Dark Harvest right now. So for top lane, Akali, Heimerdinger, Mordekaiser, Vladimir, Teemo, and Quinn are all very good with Dark Harvest, and it is their best rune right now for this patch. For Quinn, for Teemo, and for Heimerdinger, they're three champions that are doing super well with the Dark Harvest right now, and they're champions that can just very easily proc it in the laning phase. They're lane bully top lane champions. They're going to be able to bully most matchups in the top lane, so the consistent stacks that you'll be able to get with Dark Harvest from these champions makes it a great rune choice on them. And then for these situational or bad champions here in this category, the champions I have in this category are going to be picks that you'd either think are good with Dark Harvest, but there's actually a different rune that's just better on them, or they're going to be picks that you're only going to want to run Dark Harvest depending on the situation. So for Jace and Pantheon here, both can do very well with Dark Harvest, but both also do have a different rune that is doing well on them for this patch. For Pantheon, he's actually performing much better with Aftershock in the top lane. The Aftershock there is being run a lot in Korea right now by Korean Pantheon players, and it's just overall a great rune choice on him for this patch. Dark Harvest though on Pantheon is a great choice as well if you are in a lane to where you're going to be able to bully really hard in the early game and you can get your stacks. And then for Jace, Airy is a great choice as well on him right now. That rune is just a pretty consistent rune, and you can't really go wrong with taking Airy on Jace. But again, if you are in a lane where you can really abuse your laning phase and you're going to be able to get those stacks, then Dark Harvest is going to be great in that situation. So if we move on to the jungle now, generally speaking, the best junglers with Dark Harvest right now are either junglers that can really pressure hard in the early game and they're aggressive early game junglers. Junglers that are more so farm to 6 junglers, or they just don't want to gank a ton or fight a ton in the early game, aren't going to be super good with Dark Harvest. But picks like Pantheon, Shaco, Lee Sin, Nidalee, these strong early game junglers are doing great with Dark Harvest in this patch. And then for these situational champions there with Dark Harvest, Nocturne is a pick that can run it, but Lethal Tempo is just overall too good of a rune to pass up on for Nocturne. It just synergizes so well with this kit, so it is going to be the one you're going to want to take in most situations. For Graves, Fleet Footwork is just doing a lot better than Dark Harvest right now, and in most cases you are going to want to run that over the Dark Harvest. Fiddlesticks, you can either run the Electrocute or the Dark Harvest on him right now. Both are really good choices, and I think it does come down to the situation. Like if you're gonna be able to gank a ton in the early game with Fiddlesticks, if you're in like an easier jungle matchup to where you don't think you're gonna get invaded on and get bullied, then it can be good there. And then for Rengar, Fleet Footwork along with the Graves pick is just a lot better on Rengar right now, and Dark Harvest just isn't performing as well compared to that in this patch. And then for the mid lane, this is the role where there's just a ton of different champions that can run Dark Harvest in this patch. I'm not going to go over every single champion here, but some of the notables, Katarina is a great pick with Dark Harvest because Katarina benefits a ton from the resets and she's a reset champion. Dark Harvest is just great for her. It's just the perfect rune for her in this patch, and you're going to be able to proc it multiple times in team fights due to her resets. For Pyke as well, because he is another reset champion, it's just such a good rune on him. Because of the reset from your ultimate there with Pyke, you're just going to be able to get multiple Dark Harvest procs off in team fights, and you can just take over games with mid lane Pyke in this patch. Karthus right now is another pick that is absolutely insane with Dark Harvest. The rune is just making him pretty much a picker ban champion for this patch right now, so if you have yet to try out Karthus with Dark Harvest, then I definitely recommend it. And then for these situational or bad champions in the mid lane with Dark Harvest, for Diana, for Kassadin, these champions here, a lot of players are running it on them in this patch, but it's just generally not a great rune on those two picks. Both champions have pretty weak early games, so you're not really going to be able to stack Dark Harvest in the early game. And both champions are, especially Diana, she's a champion that is just looking to jump in, burst out one target, and then after that, she's not going to really be able to find a ton of resets most of the time with Dark Harvest, so it's overall just not the best rune choice on those two champions for this patch. And then for Zed and Talon, they're kind of similar to Diana in the sense that they're champions that are looking to single out one target in a team fight, burst them out, and then usually just get out of the fight. So you're not going to be getting a ton of resets with these champions in team fights compared to a lot of the other champions in the best categories. So if you're not able to really get a good snowball going with Zed and Talon in the early game, then Electrocute is just going to be a lot better on them for this patch. So I would definitely be swapping between Dark Harvest and Electrocute on those two champions, depending on your matchup and depending on the situation. And then for champions like Azir, Swain, and Anivia, who are all picks that can do a ton of consistent damage in team fights, Dark Harvest is pretty underrated on them because if you're able to get that one proc off in a team fight and get the reset from Dark Harvest, then you're most likely gonna be able to proc it again because you're gonna be in there dealing that consistent damage. So if you have yet to try it out on Azir, Swain, or Anivia for this patch, then I would recommend it. And then down in the bot lane for the AD carry or the bot lane carry champions, Jhin and Misfortune are two of the traditional AD carry picks that are doing well with Dark Harvest in this patch. And then some of these like AP carry bot lane champions right now are also doing great with the Dark Harvest. Karthus is really the only one right now that is really catching on and that a lot of people are playing in this patch. But picks like Xerath, Brand, Vel'Koz, Heimerdinger, they're all very good with the Dark Harvest as well because they're poke champions. They're going to be able to bully their opponent in the laning phase, so you're going to be able to find yourself getting a lot of Dark Harvest procs in the early game, stacking that up, and it's just going to be great on those champions due to that reason. And then lastly, to round out the video, if we take a look at the support role now, the support champions that you should be running it on are Xerath, Lux, Vel'Koz, Zyra, Brand, and Karma. All of these support picks here do have great poke potential in the laning phase, so you will be able to find a lot of Dark Harvest procs. For the situational champions there, Fiddlesticks, Veigar, and Pyke, all of these champions can do well with Dark Harvest, but they do have a different rune that is good on them as well, depending on the situation. So for Fiddlesticks and Pyke, both are good with Dark Harvest, but both are also good with Aftershock. So depending on your lane matchup, if you're in a lane to where you're not really going to be able to bully and it's a harder lane matchup, then I would just run the Aftershock on them. But if you are playing with a more aggressive AD carry and you are looking to go for kills in the laning phase, then run the Dark Harvest on your Fiddle and your Pyke. And then for Veigar, Veigar can do well with either the Glacial Augment or with the Dark Harvest in this patch. Similar goes for Veigar that went for Fiddle and Pyke. If you are in that matchup to where you're going to be able to bully in the laning phase and you are going to be able to play aggressive, then run the Dark Harvest, but if not, then run the Glacial Augment. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. Those are pretty much all the champions in this patch that are either super good with Dark Harvest or do have some potential with Dark Harvest for 823. If you do think I missed out on a certain champion that you've been running Dark Harvest on or you think is good with Dark Harvest, then be sure to let me know down in the comments below. But with that being said, guys, if you did enjoy the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you've yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.